The mahogany doors of Courtroom 4B swing open at precisely 9:15 a.m. on a crisp autumn morning in Atlanta. Marcus Thompson strides in, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished floor with each confident step. His charcoal gray Armani suit, perfectly tailored to his athletic frame, creates a stark contrast to the rebellious attitude radiating from his posture. Several heads turn in the gallery, where curious onlookers and waiting defendants observe the morning's proceedings. Judge Regina Harris glances up from her papers, her experienced eyes taking in every detail of the scene before her. Her chamber's wall displays diplomas from Howard University and Yale Law School, alongside numerous accolades earned during her 20 years on the bench. Her reputation for transforming even the most difficult cases into powerful learning experiences has become legendary throughout the Atlanta municipal court system. The morning sunlight streams through the tall windows, casting lengthy shadows across the courtroom's rich wooden furnishings. Court reporter Lisa Martinez settles into her usual position, her fingers poised above the stenotype machine. Officer James Wilson, a veteran bailiff of 15 years, stands at his post, his watchful gaze never missing a detail. Public Defender Michael Roberts shuffles through his case files, his wrinkled suit and coffee-stained tie suggesting another sleepless night preparing for today's hearings. As Thompson approaches the defendant's table, Roberts attempts to whisper some last-minute advice, but Thompson dismissively waves him off. The gallery buzzes with hushed conversations, a mix of law students observing proceedings for their classes and families supporting their loved ones. Among them sits Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, Marcus's mother, her face etched with concern as she watches her son's casual demeanor before the court. Judge Harris adjusts her reading glasses, taking a moment to review the case file before her. The charges are serious. Aggravated assault stemming from an incident at an upscale downtown restaurant. The preliminary evidence suggests a disagreement over a parking space escalated far beyond reason, but Thompson's pristine record and prominent family name have created significant media interest in the case. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Chen enters quietly through the side door, carrying a stack of files. She nods respectfully to Judge Harris before taking her position. The contrast between Thompson's expensive suit and Chen's modest courthouse attire seems to emphasize the growing tension in the room. Case number 2025 CR 789, State versus Marcus Thompson. The clerk announces, her voice clear and professional. The words echo slightly in the high-ceilinged room, marking the official beginning of what promises to be an unusual morning session. Judge Harris' chambers had received multiple calls from prominent community members regarding this case, but those who knew her understood such attempts at influence were futile. Her unwavering commitment to justice had earned her both admirers and critics throughout her career, but never once had she swayed from treating every defendant with the same measured fairness. As Thompson takes his position before the bench, his body language speaks volumes. His shoulders remain squared, chin slightly raised, with an air of someone unaccustomed to being questioned or challenged. The subtle tap of his foot against the floor betrays an impatience that Judge Harris has seen countless times before. The morning sun continues its slow journey across the courtroom floor, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, as Judge Harris prepares to begin the proceedings. The stage is set for what no one yet realizes will become one of the most talked-about sessions in recent Atlanta municipal court history. Judge Harris begins the proceedings with her characteristic methodical approach, her voice carrying the perfect balance of authority and accessibility that has become her trademark. Mr. Thompson, please state your full name and address for the record. The question hangs in the air for a moment longer than necessary before Thompson responds. Marcus James Thompson, he drawls, pausing to check his gold watch as if he has somewhere more important to be. 2847 Peachtree Avenue of Highland District. His tone carries the weight of his privileged address, a subtle reminder of his social standing. The gallery observes as Public Defender Roberts shifts uncomfortably beside his client. With 25 years of experience, Roberts recognizes the warning signs of a defendant about to complicate his own case. He slides a yellow legal pad toward Thompson with a hastily scribbled note, but Thompson pushes it away without a glance. Court reporter Martinez's fingers dance across her stenotype machine, capturing every word and nuanced interaction. Her experienced ears pick up Thompson's under-breath sighs, too soft for most to hear but permanently recorded in the official transcript. Officer Wilson takes 2 measured steps closer to the defendant's table, his presence both casual and deliberate. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Harris continues, consulting the documents before her, "I see you've retained Mr. Roberts as your counsel. Have you had sufficient time to discuss your case with him?" Her reading glasses rest halfway down her nose as she looks over them, awaiting his response. Thompson releases an exaggerated sigh that echoes off the courtroom's walls. "Look, I've got a board meeting at 11. Can't we speed this up? We all know this is just a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion." He adjusts his tie, a subtle smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. In the gallery, Mrs. Thompson clutches her designer handbag tighter, her knuckles whitening. A law student in the back row frantically scribbles notes, recognizing the developing tension as a valuable learning opportunity. Assistant District Attorney Chen straightens in her chair, already anticipating where this behavior might lead. Judge Harris maintains her composure, her years on the bench having taught her that patience often reveals more than confrontation. Her fingers lightly drum on her leather-bound notebook, each tap measuring out the seconds as she processes Thompson's dismissive responses. The morning sun has shifted, casting her shadow larger across the bench, a subtle metaphor for the growing gravity of the situation. "Mr. Thompson," she speaks again, her tone unchanged despite his obvious disrespect. "The charges before you today are serious. Aggravated assault carries significant penalties in the state of Georgia. I need to ensure you fully understand your rights and the potential consequences of today's proceedings." Thompson's response comes with an unmistakable eye roll. Yes, I understand. My father's on the State Bar Association. I probably know more about the law than most people in this room." The statement draws a quiet gasp from somewhere in the gallery, quickly silenced by Officer Wilson's stern glance. Roberts attempts one more time to guide his client, placing a cautioning hand on Thompson's sleeve. The expensive fabric pulls away as Thompson jerks his arm back, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The sound pierces the courtroom's formal atmosphere, causing several observers to wince. Judge Harris pauses, her pen hovering above her notes. The court officers exchange knowing glances. They've seen this pattern before, and they understand where it typically leads. The judge's next words come carefully measured, each one carrying the weight of decades of judicial experience. The morning light streaming through the windows seems to dim, as if nature itself senses the approaching storm. The bail discussion begins as shafts of sunlight continue their slow dance across Courtroom 4B's wooden panels. Judge Harris reviews the Pretrial Services report, her experienced eyes taking in every detail of Thompson's background, employment history, and community ties. The courtroom sits in anticipatory silence, broken only by the gentle whir of the overhead ventilation system. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Harris begins, her tone maintaining its professional equilibrium. "Given the nature of the charges and the reported injuries to the alleged victim, we need to carefully consider the conditions of your bail." She pauses briefly, glancing at the additional paperwork before her. "The prosecution has expressed concerns about witness intimidation." Thompson's jaw tightens visibly. The mention of witnesses seems to pierce through his carefully constructed facade of indifference. He leans forward, his Italian leather shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Public Defender Roberts anticipates what's coming and places a cautioning hand on his client's shoulder, but Thompson shrugs it off with enough force to knock Roberts' case files to the floor. "This is ridiculous," Thompson interrupts, his voice rising above appropriate courtroom levels. "That man barely had a scratch. He's just trying to extort money from my family. Everyone knows how these things work." His words carry an undertone that makes several gallery members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Judge Harris raises her hand slightly, a gesture that has silenced countless interruptions throughout her career. Mr. Thompson, I must remind you that these proceedings have a specific purpose and procedure. If you'll allow me to continue." Her words trail off as Thompson's face contorts with visible frustration. In the gallery, Mrs. Thompson leans forward, her designer handbag slipping forgotten to the floor. The law students in the back row have stopped taking notes, their pens frozen above their legal pads. Assistant District Attorney Chen watches intently, already mentally preparing additional motions based on Thompson's deteriorating behavior. The court must consider several factors. Judge Harris continues, her voice steady and clear, including the severity of the charges, your ties to the community, and any potential risk to witnesses. I see here that the incident occurred outside Le Petit Maison restaurant, and there are multiple witness statements suggesting, "Just shut up and get on with it." Thompson's words explode through the courtroom like a thunderclap. His chair scrapes backward with a harsh screech as he stands, his 6'2" frame towering at the defendant's table. "I don't need a lecture from you about witnesses at some overpriced restaurant." The courtroom freezes in absolute silence. Officer Wilson's hand moves instinctively to his belt as he steps forward. Court reporter Martinez's fingers hover motionless above her stenotype machine, the last angry words captured in permanent record. Even the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams seem to pause their eternal waltz. Judge Harris slowly removes her reading glasses, folding them with deliberate care. Her movements are unhurried, each gesture precise and controlled. The tension in the room builds with every passing second of silence. Roberts has his face buried in his hands, already calculating how this moment will affect any future appeals. The judge's dark eyes fix upon Thompson with an intensity that has made far more experienced attorneys reconsider their life choices. When she finally speaks, her voice carries the weight of 2 decades of judicial authority. The morning sun has reached its zenith, and shadows retreat from the bench as if clearing the stage for what's about to unfold. The weight of silence blankets courtroom 4B as Judge Harris places her folded reading glasses on the bench with surgical precision. Her movements are deliberate, each gesture carrying the gravitas of someone who has earned their authority through years of unwavering dedication to justice. The morning sun now streams directly through the tall windows, illuminating her face as she prepares to address the situation before her. "Mr. Thompson," she begins, her voice carrying to every corner of the hushed courtroom. "In my 20 years on this bench, I have encountered defendants from all walks of life. Some were desperate, some were afraid, and yes, some were privileged." She pauses, allowing her words to settle in the still air. But they all learned one fundamental truth about this courtroom. Respect for these proceedings is not optional. Thompson's previous bravado begins to crack like thin ice under spring sun. His perfectly tailored suit suddenly seems to fit less comfortably as beads of sweat form on his forehead. Officer Wilson stands directly behind him now, his presence a reminder of the courtroom's swift transition from civil proceeding to potential custody situation. Public Defender Roberts quickly rises to his feet, legal pad in hand. "Your Honor, if I may, my client wishes to apologize for his outburst. The stress of these proceedings." But Judge Harris raises her hand, silencing him mid-sentence. The gallery watches, transfixed, as she transforms the situation into a masterclass in judicial authority. "The court takes notice of the time, Mr. Thompson," she continues, referencing his earlier complaint about his 11 o'clock board meeting. "You'll be interested to know that the holding cells downstairs have very reliable clocks. You'll have ample opportunity to watch them during your 30-day contempt of court sentence." A gasp ripples through the gallery. Mrs. Thompson's hand flies to her mouth, her designer bracelet catching the sunlight. Assistant District Attorney Chen maintains her professional composure, but the slight upturn at the corner of her mouth betrays her satisfaction at this turn of events. Furthermore, Judge Harris continues, her voice steady and clear, "Your bail hearing will be postponed until after you serve your contempt sentence. Officer Wilson, please take Mr. Thompson into custody." The judge's words seem to hover in the air, each one a brick in the wall of consequences now surrounding Thompson. Thompson's face cycles through a range of emotions: shock, anger, disbelief, and finally, the first glimmer of understanding. His expensive watch catches the light as Officer Wilson steps forward with his handcuffs. The metallic click of the restraints echoes through the silent courtroom, providing a percussion track to Thompson's fall from arrogance. "Your Honor," Roberts tries one more time, his voice carrying the weariness of a public defender who's seen this scene before. "May I request a moment to explain to my client the implications of this development?" Judge Harris considers this request, her dark eyes studying Thompson's now deflated posture. "You may have 5 minutes in the holding area, Mr. Roberts," she concedes, her tone professional but firm. "Though I suspect your client is beginning to understand the implications quite well on his own." She makes a notation in her leather-bound notebook, the scratch of her pen against paper audible in the hushed courtroom. As Officer Wilson leads Thompson toward the side door, the defendant's expensive shoes no longer click with confidence against the polished floor. The gallery watches in silence as the man who entered with such arrogance exits in custody, his mother's quiet sobs providing a poignant soundtrack to his departure. Judge Harris takes a moment to organize her thoughts as the side door closes behind Thompson and Officer Wilson. The afternoon session is about to begin, but she recognizes this as a teaching moment for everyone present in her courtroom. The sunlight has shifted, casting long shadows across the judicial seal mounted on the wall behind her bench. Before we proceed with the afternoon calendar, she begins, her voice carrying the perfect blend of authority and wisdom. "I would like to address the events we've just witnessed." The gallery sits straighter, and the law students in the back row retrieve their pens, ready to capture every word. "In this courtroom," she continues, gesturing to the space around her, "we see humanity in all its forms. We see people on their best days and their worst. We see moments of triumph and moments of regret." She pauses, letting her words settle in the hushed atmosphere. "But what we witnessed today was something different, a reminder that respect for the law isn't measured by the cost of one's suit or the prominence of one's family name." Assistant District Attorney Chen nods almost imperceptibly as she makes notes in her case file. Public Defender Roberts, having returned from the holding area, listens intently, knowing these words might prove crucial for his future conversations with Thompson. The record should reflect, Judge Harris proceeds, lifting a document from her bench, that Mr. Thompson entered this courtroom with significant advantages. A respected attorney, strong community ties, and resources many defendants can only dream of. She adjusts her reading glasses, now back in their proper place. Yet he chose to squander these advantages through behavior that this court cannot and will not tolerate. Mrs. Thompson dabs at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, her designer handbag now clutched close like a shield. Around her, other gallery members listen with rapt attention, some nodding in agreement with the judge's words. "I want to be clear," Judge Harris's voice takes on an educational tone, "that today's consequences weren't just about Mr. Thompson's final outburst. They were about a pattern of behavior that demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of what this court represents." She gestures to the court reporter, who hasn't missed a word. "Ms. Martinez, please note that the record will reflect multiple instances of disrespect, including but not limited to dismissive responses to standard questions, inappropriate commentary about court procedures, and a general demeanor inconsistent with the gravity of these proceedings." The afternoon sun catches the judge's nameplate, casting a golden glow across her desk. This court has seen defendants facing life sentences show more respect for these proceedings than Mr. Thompson displayed today. The right to a fair trial, the presumption of innocence. These are not inconveniences to be rushed through. They are the foundational principles of our justice system. Judge Harris lifts her gavel, though she has no intention of using it. The simple gesture draws every eye in the room. When Mr. Thompson returns to this courtroom in 30 days, he will find the same fair and impartial proceedings waiting for him. The same constitutional protections. The same opportunity to present his defense. She places the gavel back down with deliberate care. The only question is whether he will have learned to appreciate them. The gallery remains silent, absorbing the weight of her words. Even the usual shuffling of papers and creaking of chairs has ceased. Through the tall windows, the city of Atlanta continues its daily bustle, but within these walls, time seems suspended in this moment of clarity. The holding area's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Thompson's face as he sits on the metal bench, his Armani suit collecting dust from the worn walls behind him. Public Defender Roberts settles into the chair across from him, placing his worn leather briefcase on the floor. The contrast between Thompson's designer outfit and the stark reality of his current situation couldn't be more apparent. So, Roberts begins, removing his wire-rimmed glasses to clean them with his tie. I imagine this isn't how you plan to spend your afternoon. His voice carries neither judgment nor sympathy, just the steady tone of someone who has seen this scene play out countless times before. Thompson stares at his reflection in the holding area's scratched plexiglass window. His perfectly styled hair has become disheveled, and his confident smirk has been replaced by something closer to disbelief. "This is outrageous," he mutters, but the words lack their previous fire. "She can't just." "She can, and she did." Roberts interrupts, replacing his glasses. "And before you mention appeals or your father's connections, let me explain something about Judge Harris." He pulls out a yellowed legal pad, its pages curved from years of use. "In 15 years of practicing in her courtroom, I've seen her decisions appealed 47 times. Want to guess how many were overturned?" Thompson's silence prompts Roberts to continue. 3. All on technical matters of law, none on questions of judicial discretion or bias. He leans forward, his voice dropping slightly. "Your father's friends on the state bar, they respect her. The appeals court judges, they quote her opinions. That woman you just told to shut up has earned every ounce of authority she holds." The fluorescent light above them flickers, as if emphasizing the point. Through the thick walls, they can hear the muffled sounds of the courthouse continuing its daily business. Thompson shifts on the metal bench, his expensive suit providing little comfort against the cold surface. "But my board meeting." Thompson begins, his voice smaller now. Roberts holds up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "Let me paint you a picture," the public defender says, flipping through his legal pad. "Last week, I watched Judge Harris handle a case involving a single mother of 3. The woman faced shoplifting charges for taking children's medicine she couldn't afford. Judge Harris listened to every detail, treated her with dignity, and found a way to get her into a program instead of jail." He pauses, letting the story sink in. "That's who you just disrespected. Someone who sees the humanity in every person who enters her courtroom, regardless of their circumstances." Thompson's eyes drift to his handcuffed wrists, the gold of his watch now seeming less important than the steel around his wrists. Roberts notices the shift in his client's demeanor and presses on. "Your original charges, those were serious but manageable. We had options. Now," he shakes his head slowly, "now we have to rebuild credibility with the court. Judge Harris will be fair when you return. She always is. But she'll be watching to see if you've learned anything from this experience." The holding area's door opens briefly as another defendant is led past, the stranger's curious glance taking in Thompson's expensive suit and defeated posture. Roberts gathers his papers, preparing to leave. "Think about something," he says, standing up. "Every person who comes through that courtroom, from CEOs to the homeless, gets the same thing from Judge Harris: respect and fairness. She's not the one who failed to understand that today." He taps his briefcase thoughtfully. "You have 30 days to think about it. I suggest you use them wisely." The County Detention Center's video conference room becomes Thompson's window into a world he never knew existed. Each morning, he joins other inmates to observe court proceedings through a large screen mounted on the wall. His designer suit has been replaced by standard issue orange, and his Italian leather shoes swapped for basic slip-ons, but his attention has never been sharper. During his first week, Thompson watches a parade of cases through the video feed, each one teaching him something new about Judge Harris' courtroom. A young college student faces drug possession charges, trembling as she addresses the court. The judge speaks to her with the same measured respect she had attempted to show Thompson. taking time to ensure the student understands her options for rehabilitation programs. She really does treat everyone the same, Thompson mumbles to himself, earning a knowing nod from the corrections officer supervising the video room. The officer, Deputy Martinez, has seen this realization dawn on other privileged inmates before. By the second week, Thompson finds himself drawn into the subtle dynamics of the courtroom he once dismissed. He notices how Judge Harris leans forward slightly when defendants seem confused, how she simplifies legal terminology without being condescending, and how she ensures every voice in her courtroom gets heard, from nervous first-time offenders to seasoned prosecutors. During a particularly memorable session, Thompson watches her handle a case involving a wealthy real estate developer accused of permit violations. The developer's aggressive attorney attempts to steamroll the proceedings, much as Thompson himself had tried to do. Judge Harris' response is a masterclass in judicial temperament, firm but fair, authoritative but never authoritarian. "That could have been me," Thompson whispers, running a hand over his now stubbled chin. The developer's case concludes with a fair ruling that manages to protect both public interest and private property rights. Thompson makes mental notes, beginning to understand the delicate balance Judge Harris maintains in every case. In his third week, a fellow inmate points out something Thompson had missed entirely. "Watch how she handles the court reporters," the man suggests. Thompson observes as Judge Harris occasionally pauses during complex testimonies, ensuring the court record captures everything accurately. The same consideration he had tried to interrupt and rush through now reveals itself as essential to justice. The afternoon sessions become Thompson's favorite, as they often feature first appearances, defendants experiencing their first interaction with the court system. He sees fear, arrogance, confusion, and desperation play out on the video screen. More importantly, he watches Judge Harris navigate each emotion with unwavering professionalism. "Your Honor," a nervous teenager begins during one session, his voice crackling through the video feed. "I don't understand what's happening." Instead of showing frustration, Judge Harris takes time to explain the process, much as she had attempted to do for Thompson before his outburst. By the final week of his contempt sentence, Thompson has witnessed over 100 cases. He's seen Judge Harris handle minor traffic violations with the same attention she gives to serious felonies. He's watched her work through lunch breaks to ensure every case gets proper consideration. Most importantly, he's understood that her methodical approach isn't about asserting authority, it's about ensuring justice. On his last morning in custody, Thompson finds himself sharing his insights with a newly arrived inmate who's scheduled to appear before Judge Harris. Listen carefully to everything she says, he advises, surprising himself with how much he sounds like his public defender. She's not just following procedures, she's protecting your rights. Deputy Martinez overhears this exchange and checks his watch with a slight smile. In less than 24 hours, Thompson will have his chance to demonstrate what he's learned in Judge Harris' courtroom. The question that hangs in the air is whether this month of observation has truly transformed the man who once thought himself above the law. Exactly 30 days after his outburst, Thompson stands once again before the bench in Courtroom 4B. His suit, though still expensive, is more subdued, a dark navy rather than his previous flashy charcoal gray. His posture speaks volumes. Shoulders relaxed but straight, hands clasped respectfully in front, eyes focused attentively on Judge Harris rather than wandering dismissively around the room. The morning sun streams through the tall windows at a different angle now, autumn having progressed another month. The gallery is full, with many observers curious to see the return of the defendant, whose confrontation with Judge Harris had become something of a courthouse legend. Mrs. Thompson sits in the front row, her eyes showing cautious optimism rather than the previous month's distress. "Good morning, Your Honor," Thompson speaks before being prompted, his voice clear but devoid of its former arrogance. "Before we proceed with the bail hearing, I would like to address my behavior from our last meeting, if the court permits." Judge Harris nods slightly, her reading glasses perched precisely where they have been a month ago. Public Defender Roberts stands beside his client, a subtle smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He's witnessed many transformations in his career, but few as profound as this one. Assistant District Attorney Chen watches with professional interest, her case file open but untouched on the prosecution's table. Your Honor, Thompson continues, his words measured and sincere. 30 days ago, I stood in this spot believing that my time was more valuable than this court's procedures. I confused wealth with worth and status with significance. He pauses, gathering his thoughts. Through the generosity of this court's video access program, I've spent the past month watching you conduct proceedings with a level of dedication and fairness that I failed to appreciate. The courtroom remains silent. Every person present understanding they're witnessing something rare, genuine transformation. Officer Wilson, standing at his usual post, notices that Thompson's hands aren't fidgeting as they did during his first appearance. I observed you handle cases involving people from all walks of life, Thompson adds, his voice steady. I watched you ensure that every person, regardless of their circumstances, received the full protection of the law. The same protection I arrogantly dismissed. He straightens his tie, a gesture of nervousness rather than superiority this time. I owe this court and you personally a profound apology. Judge Harris studies him carefully, her experienced eyes taking in every detail of his changed demeanor. The same sunlight that had illuminated his previous arrogance now highlights a newfound humility. Court reporter Martinez's fingers hover over her stenotype machine, ready to record this moment for the official record. Mr. Thompson, Judge Harris finally speaks, removing her reading glasses with the same deliberate grace as before. This court appreciates your words. More importantly, it appreciates the understanding behind them. She places her glasses carefully on the bench. Shall we proceed with your bail hearing? The next 20 minutes unfold exactly as they should have 30 days ago. Thompson listens attentively as Judge Harris explains each condition of his bail. He responds to her questions with yes, Your Honor, and no, Your Honor, each replay carrying genuine respect rather than superficial compliance. As the hearing concludes, Judge Harris makes one final observation. Mr. Thompson, the law, like this courtroom, stands ready to protect everyone's rights, not as a favor to be granted, but as a fundamental principle of justice. She picks up her pen to sign the bail order. I trust you'll carry this understanding with you beyond these walls. Thompson nods solemnly, understanding that this moment represents not just his release from custody, but his embrace of a deeper truth about justice, respect, and the dignity of every person who seeks it.